What's up, folks, and welcome to Retro Ramble. So, I got something a bit different for you guys this time. This is a series that is very fondly remembered by PC and European console enthusiasts from back in the day, but which a lot of you might not have heard of. It just got a release on modern systems, and well, it's really overpriced, but also a really important series that I think a lot of people might be interested in. So, this is Turrican Anthology Volume 1 and 2. Yes, you heard that right. This is split up into two packages if you want everything, and they're both really expensive. You're basically paying the price of a AAA game to get everything in this package. And I'm going to say right off the bat that I don't agree with that. This is the only retro package I can think of that's been split up in this fashion. I think it's way overpriced at that level, and I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit by charging that much, also when it's restricted to only two platforms right now. But yeah, that is something you're going to have to determine for yourself. You can buy the packs independently, but the way they split the games up, if you want everything and you want to experience the whole series, you got to buy the whole lot. Yeah, not great on that one. But so as usual, there's going to be chapter descriptors down below that you can click on if you want to skip past certain sections. We are going to talk about the technical benefits of this collection and how well it works, and I'll quickly show you each of the different games here. But first up, a little history lesson. So Turrican was a series that came out on a few different platforms back in the day. This collection is kind of showcasing the lead platforms, if you will. So that is the Amiga, the Super Nintendo, and the Genesis/Mega Drive. The Amiga versions were developed by a company called Rainbow Arts, but the series as a whole and the console versions were developed by a German studio named Factor 5. They were around for a long time and did a lot of interesting titles, the last of which was the rather unfortunate Lair for the PlayStation 3. It was a launch title for that system, and it didn't do very well, and it kind of killed Factor 5. I think they technically still exist, but they haven't made anything in quite a while, though their name is on this collection. And this collection was put out by Rodalaika Games, who have put out some decent retro packs, actually. Some stuff that I've played that I actually thought was pretty cool. They're also rather famous for publishing a lot of indie shovelware games that are sold cheaply and have super easy to get trophies and achievements. There's actually a cottage industry for that now, if you can believe it. But this is a pack where I have to say they really put in some work. I think this one is pretty good. And I tell you what, you want to get all the achievements and trophies in this, you're going to work for it. These are not pushovers, that's for darn sure. So, let's get into what this offers from a technical perspective in terms of this repackaging. First things first, like most of these Rodalaika packages, the emulation quality is actually pretty good on these. I have to say, comparing them against actual emulators, I don't have original hardware for these games, unfortunately. They do play quite well. On a modern television or monitor, you might notice a little bit of input lag because these were all originally built for CRT televisions and monitors, which had a lot less input lag. There's not too much you can do about that. You got to work within those constraints a little bit. But the package brings with it a lot of quality of life options, which I think people are going to appreciate. So, as is commonplace, you have save and load states, so you can, make yourself save checkpoints within the games, which you're going to need because these games are hard. Quite hard, actually. There's actually cheats, which the games did have originally. Strangely, you have to beat the game once to be able to unlock these, which I find a little bit strange. But you can do that. They actually do have scans of the manual from all the different regions the game was sold in, which I think is really cool. The Amiga manual is rather basic. It doesn't have a lot going on. But nonetheless, it's here, and I think that's really cool to be able to take a look at. There is a jukebox function. You can play all of the different songs in the game, and in their original forms as they would have come out of the original hardware, but some of the tracks in this also have what they call studio versions, which are basically CD quality remakes of the tracks, and you can choose which versions of these play in the game as well. I think that's really cool. You can have the sort of chiptune version or a more modern version if you like. Really, really nice. In terms of the controls, unlike a lot of modern console games, still, you can fully remap all the buttons. Really, really appreciate that. I'd love to see more games do this. They also have presets here, which are really cool. The standard preset is what I'm going to use here, but I'm going to kind of suck at these games because aside from the fact that I suck at these games, The standard controller preset is a little weird. You can, if you really want to punish yourself, you can make it like the way they played back on the original hardware. There's more classic style console controls and also what they call modern controls, which they actually say are the best controls for a modern audience, but they're not the default, which I find kind of weird. But you can choose to customize these with your own presets if you like, in terms of the way it describes the different control styles here. And you can get really granular with it. You don't see this in a lot of even really advanced packs, so really good on them for that. You can turn your vibration on and off. You can choose so the HUD in most of these games is persistent, stays on the screen at all times. You can make it so that you can turn it off and on to get more screen real estate if you want. You can even adjust the transparency of that. These games were made for the European market, so most of them do play at 50 hertz, which is 50 frames a second. You can actually increase them to 60 if you want. The games will play faster, and the sound will play faster as well. But it does give better scrolling on modern televisions. So that's something to keep in mind. The game, in its standard mode, does have a rewind function. You can change the speed of that. It also has an auto map that will show you what you've uncovered in the game. You can reset that so that you cover it all up. You can reset all the settings at once or go to factory defaults. For video, they have display options in this, not as advanced as, say, an M2 pack, but better than some other packs. So the standard way it's displayed is 4:3, the standard 4:3. You can go to various forms of pixel perfect settings, which will give you a sharper image, but obviously a much smaller screen. Also, you can stretch it out to fill your full screen, but if you do that, you're a monster, and we know that. They have this thing called the scale filter, which to me doesn't really do much. There is a full screen preview mode if you want. I don't really know what this changes, but it's there. You can change the color palette because I don't know why, but it's there if you want it. And then they have what's called the CRT shader, which is scan lines. And I'm not into this. A lot of people are, but it gives you a crazy amount of flexibility. You want to make this look like you're playing it on a TV that you found on the side of the highway? You do you. It's all here. I think it's really cool. Though the gamma doesn't seem to do much of anything, which I find a little bit strange. But yeah, there are a lot of different options there if you want that. Really interesting. There is a rather anemic selection of wallpapers here. You don't really get to look at these very much because these are displayed on the sides of the game window when you're playing it because it doesn't fill up the screen. Change your brightness to saturation. You can have the auto map that you normally have to bring up with a separate button stay on the screen at all times. You can have it in the corner, or you can turn it on in a like transparent Diablo style map that sits on top of the actual play area. Again, really, really cool. I like that. You can change the stereo separation. You can choose what version of the music that you want. Do you want to have CD quality? Do you want to have it emulated? Do you want the original music or the studio versions? How loud do you want it? Do you want to hear the music only? Do you want to turn the sound effects off? Crazy amount of stuff in here, and I really, really appreciate that. More options is always good, even if there's stuff that I wouldn't always use. So, and every game as well has this. It has the standard mode where you can use the rewind, the save states, and the cheats, but you can earn trophies. And they have the challenge mode where you can earn trophies, but you're playing it the way it was originally intended with no handholds. Yeah, this game, like I said, it does it, and they don't mess around. Now, we'll do a little tour of each of these, of each of the ones that are available here in the pack. And the thing about the Turrican series that is why it is so widely regarded by Amiga and mostly European console enthusiasts is because Factor 5 knew how to make platforms do things that at the time nobody really thought possible. Factor 5 has its origins, some of its staff anyway, in the European demo scene. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's something I'm hoping to maybe be able to talk about a little bit more on this channel at some point in the future. But the demo scene was where a bunch of really elite coders, artists, and musicians, most of them fairly young people, would get together and make these freely distributed projects that were designed. They were usually self-running demos. They weren't interactive, and they were designed to absolutely push the envelope to its red line limits of the platforms that they chose to make it on. Any system you can think of, has had a demo scene for it. From the oldest computers to this day, there are still demo scene groups out there. And their whole purpose was bragging rights, just to go, look at the crazy stuff we can do with these systems. And a lot of them went on, because they were very technically, they were people who had crazy tech chops, went on to form game studios. Some of you may know of studios like, for example, Remedy Entertainment. And Remedy Entertainment got its origins in one of the most widely known demo scene groups, which was called Future Crew back in the day. Factor 5 had some origins in that scene as well. And because of that, they had insane technical chops. And that's what comes through in this series. These are good games, but because they're from an era where they couldn't make games very long or huge necessarily, they're also really, really hard. Because in the 8 and 16-bit eras, that's what you did. You made games that were... If you couldn't make a game long, you made it really, really difficult. And that's what this is. These games are not pushovers. Even if you're using the rewind function and the save states somewhat liberally, you are going to work for your victory in these games. But it was considered kind of a badge of honor back in the day to say, yeah, I beat Turrican. People would be like, whoa, really? And yeah. So they are a good series, but because Factor 5 doesn't really exist anymore, and because this series kind of died off in the 16-bit era, there are not really... It's kind of been lost to history to a certain degree. People who remember these games fondly are mostly people who are around back in that era, and who might not necessarily, a lot of newer players might not necessarily know about these. And that's a shame, because it was a series that broke a lot of molds, because it was they were really well-made games, and they were technologically stunners at the time. Because one of the things that was impressive about this is, though these are somewhat linear action platformer games, you may have seen a little bit there when I was playing Turrican 1, is that the levels are somewhat open, actually. This is not an open world, not even remotely so, but the levels do allow you to take your time and explore them a little bit and approach them in different ways if you want. You can spend time looking around, trying to find collectibles, trying to find, extra power-ups, extra things for score. And these games do have local leaderboards, not online, but they do have local leaderboards. And so they were good for explorers as well as just raw action players, and they encourage people to replay them on a regular basis. And to go back multiple times to look for all the different things that they missed. Kind of like how back in the early era of first-person shooters, a lot of people who played games like Doom and Quake would want to go back and play them again to find all the secrets in different levels. And that's kind of what these did. And that was quite revolutionary at the time. Especially, and when these came out on each of their respective platforms, they blew everybody's mind to look at them, because they just did things that nobody thought possible. So these first two games here I've been showing you are from the Amiga. Okay, well, maybe you don't know the Amiga very well, but maybe you know the Super Nintendo. Okay. Well, Factor 5 made the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive also do things that people were like, and these games really show that off. This one actually has a fairly lengthy intro. And what's interesting about this, too, is that all the games on the different platforms... Well, take a look. This looks quite a bit different, doesn't it? Now, they all share a little bit of DNA. You're going to see that, like, the games on the Mega Drive resemble Turrican 3 a lot on the Amiga, which is in the second pack that I'll show you in a little bit. But they all look and play... They all have the same core DNA, but they all have very much their own identity and their own differences in terms of playstyle and level design and, weapons and soundtracks and everything. And that's something you don't really see these days anymore. Like, for example, if a game comes out on, say, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 today, what are you getting? Well, some of them might have like a slightly different pre-order bonus or something like that, but you're getting effectively the same game content-wise and probably looks-wise as well. Well, back in the day, it was not uncommon for different versions of the same title on different platforms to be quite a bit different from each other in many different ways. And that's what they did with these. If you played this on the Amiga, and then you played it on the Super Nintendo, and then on the Mega Drive, you were getting sometimes similar but different, and in some cases radically different experiences. So you could actually play this series multiple times in multiple places, and not be playing the same thing over and over again. That was pretty cool at the time. And what was really interesting is that Factor 5 didn't skimp on any one platform. It was not uncommon also back then to have games that had sort of a lead skew. So say a game came out on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. Well, a lot of developers would have one platform or the other that was sort of their lead platform. American developers, it was usually the Super Nintendo. European developers, it was usually the Genesis, though there were exceptions. And the game would come out in both places, and you would often see that one version would be the obviously superior one. It would have more features, it would run better, it would look better, it would sound better, it would sometimes have more content, and the version on the other platform would be fine, I guess, if that's all you had access to, but it was clear that that one didn't get the same amount of love and care. Factor 5 was not like that. Every one of these games on every one of their platforms plays to the strength of each system. The Super Nintendo and the Genesis were quite different from each other in terms of both the hardware that was in them and what they were able to do. You couldn't just write a game for the Super Nintendo, hit a button, and get a Genesis version that looked and ran just as well. No, you really had to redo them in many cases, especially from the programming end, from the ground up. And a lot of developers just didn't put in that work. They would either put the game out on only one system, or they'd skimp on the second version. That's not what they did here. Each of these versions feels like it was tailor-made for the system it was put on, and tailor-made to take advantage of that system. Like, look at this. This is on the Super Nintendo. Like, look at this boss. It's crazy. You know, these games were different in that they had multiple different kinds of weapons. I haven't really been showing those very much, but they have, like, they have a main gun that you can fire by holding down a button. They have another gun that plays almost like a twin-stick game you use with the right stick in this case. And then they have a special weapon as well. And these weapons can be changed and upgraded throughout the game. And you're supposed to utilize these in various different ways in order to pull different things off. And, you know, it was a gameplay style. It was complicated. It could be complicated if you wanted it to be. And it was a gameplay style and design that, again, you didn't see very often. And they really made all the different versions of these games the best they could be on their respective systems, which is something I really, really respect. So I've shown you a lot of this one. So what we'll do here is, so they also include in this collection what they call director's cut versions of the console games. These are games that have a bunch of originally cut levels in them and other content. These came out on the analog, I believe it was the Super NT, as pack-ins, and they also came out from Strictly Limited in cartridge forms that you could buy if you wanted. Really cool to see these in here. Each of these versions also got what's called the score attack mode, which is effectively a ROM hack where you're on an extended timer and you're supposed to play for as long as you can and score as much as you can. You're not aiming to finish the game, just to score as much as possible. So those versions are cool. They're based off the original, so if you've seen one, you've seen the other in that respect. But so I'm going to switch over to the other package here so that I can show you the full breadth of the Genesis games, and also the third version on the Amiga. This is where I get frustrated that the package gets split up, because you get the Mega Turrican score attack mode in the first pack, but if you want to play the base game or the director's cut, you got to do it in the second pack. Same thing if you want Turrican 3 or Super Turrican 2. Again, these packs are expensive enough on their own. It should have been one. It should have been both for that one price, in my opinion. Maybe there was licensing involved. Maybe there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know, but it's still, even as a fan of this stuff, it's not the best value in the world. So this is Turrican 3, which is the later Amiga game. This is more what the Mega Drive game is based on, but you'll see that they are also quite a bit different from each other. And this one was done by Factor 5 in-house, I believe. This one wasn't done by Rainbow Arts. And as you can see, some really cool artwork in here. And here we go. And you can see, even by looking at this, how far they came in just a couple of years. Turrican 1 was really impressive. This one is next level. It plays smoother, it looks better, it has, you know, more bells and whistles, more capability, including this, like, Bionic Commando swing arm that they added as kind of your secondary weapon. This is in most of the console games, but nonetheless, you know, this was a big gameplay change as well. And this only came out a couple of years after the first game. And it shows just not just that Factor 5 was incredibly talented, but that they never stopped learning. They just didn't keep making, you know, the same thing with new content. They were learning how to make, you know, better, more, how to improve their tech even further. When they were already light years ahead of most of their competition, they still just kept pushing the envelope. And it's a really cool history lesson in that respect, because these are all good games, but at the same time, you get to play through them and see just how this series and the developer behind it evolved, and how they kept improving and kept putting so much work in. And I think that's really cool as an enthusiast of this kind of stuff. Now, the thing is, I'm talking pretty highly of this collection, and indeed I am. I think it's quite good. I think it's really good, actually. I do think it's insanely priced. I think if you are and I don't know at that price kind of who they're trying to sell this to. Because if you want to sell it to hardcore, old school gamers who, you know, that really hardcore crowd probably either has the original stuff they can play it on, or knows how emulators work and can just play these for free easily. And, you know, there's something to be said for having a version that has modern convenience features and quality of life stuff, and that you can just, you know, hit a button and you're in it, no fuss, no muss. But this is awfully expensive for that. And for new players who maybe either heard of Turrican from somebody, or really don't, you know, or don't know anything about it, but are like, ooh, cool, you know, I like good action, you know, good action platformers. Charging AAA price for what is about a half dozen games plus a couple of variants, that's a lot. Like, if I hadn't gotten press code for this, I would have waited for a deep sale to pick these up. Because I like the Turrican series, but do I like it that much? I don't know, man. Now, yeah, if you wanted to play these totally OG and wanted to buy collections like this on eBay and pay, you know, original hardware to play them on, yeah, well, good luck. I hope you like taking that second mortgages. But nonetheless, I think it's a little bit much to be charging that kind of money, not just for any retro pack, but for a retro pack of a series that a lot of people don't know. And that's the kind of bummer about this, because I know lots of young people who are interested in retro games because they like the fact that they're a little simpler and that they don't have the learning curve of modern games. And I've known a lot of young people who are into modern games, but who like this stuff because they like seeing where the medium came from. It's like people who it's very similar to people who enjoy old movies, right? And that's the thing, is these are not going to appeal to those people, because most people, especially people who don't know these titles, are going to look at them and go, you're asking an awful lot of money for some old games. And they are. And again, hardcore old school enthusiasts know how to play these cheaper, and new people are probably not going to get into these at this price. I really do think that they're shooting themselves in the foot to a certain degree, because these are good games. I mean, look at this. This is Turrican 2, or Super Turrican 2. This is on a Super Nintendo. Like, stuff like this is the kind of thing you often only saw in arcades. And you were like, man, I wish I could play that at home. You didn't get quality like this on home systems a lot. And it was really amazing what they were able to do. And I think a lot of people who like this genre of game, but haven't played these, because a lot of people haven't, because like I said, this series got lost to time to a certain point, could probably really enjoy this, but they're going to see the price and be like, hell no. And yeah, I don't understand why they charge so much for it. Especially when I don't want to be mean here, but Rodaleka has a very mixed track record when it comes to quality. And for better or for worse, while they put out some good stuff, including, you know, they put out some cool stuff like some of the retro shmups that I've covered lately, more obscure titles that are really, really cool. They've also put out some weirder titles like Avenging Spirit, which is, you know, it's not necessarily my favorite title in the universe, but it's neat and obscure, and purely for preservation angles and allowing a new generation to experience some of these new and different things, I think that's great that they're doing that. But Rodaleka also has unfortunately, a bit of a reputation for putting out shovelware for farming trophies and achievements. And when you're putting out a package like this, with that name on it, at this price, and you're only putting it out on PlayStation and Switch, not Xbox and not PC, why? Seriously. I don't know how you expect to make your money back on that. Maybe they have. I don't know. I ain't no game dev biz guy, so maybe they know things that I don't. But this feels like a really cool opportunity to showcase a game and a series that I hold a lot of fondness for, that a lot of retro gamers hold fondness for, and that I think a lot of new players would really enjoy. You know, if you're into stuff like Contra, this is a great series for people who know those games. But you're charging this amount of money for it, and you're splitting it up into 2 packs? It just feels hyper greedy to a degree that is going to turn off a lot of your potential audience. And that bums me out, because Turrican is really cool. And, you know, in my deepest dreams, I would love to see a world where this could have done so well that maybe somebody could get together and be like, hey, I'd like to make a new one of those. But I don't know how much success they're going to get with that when they're charging this much for it. Yeah, I mean, there are collections out there that have literally dozens of classic titles in them. And yeah, they're the more well-known quantities that you've seen a million times before, but nonetheless, there are packs out there with dozens of games in them that cost, in some cases, only what half of this pack does. And it's just a really tough value proposition. I don't know what led to that, but I think that's a shame. But if you got the cash, or you're willing to wait for a sale, which is probably what I would recommend, you should check these out. If you're into action platformers, if you're into stuff like Contra or things like that, these are really good. They're challenging, but they're very rewarding, and they were true marvels back in their day that don't get the amount of historical credit they deserve. A lot of what, you know, games like this evolved into can be laid at the feet of this series, and it's something that I think it's important we get more recognition, that they get more recognition for, and this collection gives that the opportunity. But maybe got to open your wallet for it a little bit. So yeah, that is Turrican Anthology Volumes 1 and 2. It is out now, only for PlayStation and Switch. I don't know why. Seriously, guys, fix that. PC, Xbox, please. Get this in front of more people, and maybe try to lower the price a little bit if you can. That would be really cool. It's a great series, but yeah, maybe wait for a sale. Or not, you know, maybe you see the value in this, and if you do, that is awesome. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think of these? You know, do you want to try these? Are they too expensive for you? If they are, what do you think is a good price for these for you? What platforms would you want to play them on? And, you know, what are other action platformers that you really liked from back in the day? There's certainly no shortage of them, and there's a lot that people don't necessarily know very well. Oh, and my controller's starting to die, so there's a good time to cut that off. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover other indies over there and other retro stuff as well, including things you won't see over here on YouTube. We have a fantastic community there, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, all, and I'll see you on the next Retro Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.